Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Allison. Today's guest is Shaun Hayes. This man is a successful businessman, but before he got there, he did go to jail, and now he's here to talk to us about his story of how he bounced back from this adversity in his life to become a successful businessman again today. I can't wait to get into this conversation, guys. Let's go. Hey, Shaun, welcome to the Overcoming Adversity Podcast, brother. Thank you so much for joining me, man, today.
Michael, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on your podcast, and I appreciate all that you do for the many people who work with you and who watch your podcast.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure, brother. So thank you, man. You know, your story is one of true resilience and bounce back. There's so many people that could have gotten into many situations in business. They could have given up. They could have quit. They could have started blaming a whole bunch of people within that. But you chose to pick up the pieces, bounce back. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, man? And how did you get to that situation, man?
Yeah, I think that one thing that got me along the way was somebody said to me, "Why didn't you just crawl in a hole?" And I never thought of this, but then you started with the word people did. They said, "You're one of the most resilient people we've ever met." And what's unique about my story, Michael, is, you know, I started with nothing, built it and at 29 bought a bank, and at 35 took it public and ran a public company for about 8 years, sold it for $500 million. And then I committed 5 years later, unrelated to that, a crime, and spent 37 months in the county jail federal prison system. And then I was able to come back. But I believe that, and I didn't learn this till I had failed. And you read it, and there's all kinds of things you read, and I'll tell your audience, believe them when you read stuff like this. And what I read that changed a lot for me was when I read failure is an event. When you quit's when you fail.
Right.
But other than that, it's just an event, pick up and go on. And I spent my whole life playing sports, and you win and you lose and you get up and you play again. And that aided me. I have to say that and having parents who said quitters never win and winners never quit. That was it. But you mentioned this before we started, and I want to throw this out there because I think it'll resonate with your audience. And that is this. I had a nephew. I have two nephews. One's a golfer named Brant Snedeker. He was PGA Rookie of the Year in 2007, won the FedEx Cup in 2012. Had a great career. And an older nephew who's a better golfer than he is, was an All-American as well, but was never a professional. And he wrote me a letter, and I got it the week I was sentenced. And it said, "Uncle Shaun," because this was right when Tiger Woods was coming back several years ago. He said, "Everybody loves an Horatio Alger from your bootstraps up success story, but they really love to watch you fail. But what they really love is the comeback." And at that very season in his life, Tiger Woods had a comeback, and I've had a comeback. And it's by being resilient. It's by not quitting. It's believing in yourself. And the other thing that I always talk about is all these things about you can only control your own actions, your own mind, your own thinking. That's what drives me. And if you let the world into your brain and you let them control you and they're your mind, then you're going to crawl in that hole. And when you suffer any kind of adversity, and I know you've been through adversity, as I said to you earlier, literally from the day you were born. And people who overcome that, they just know that they're not going to make everybody happy. That you can only control your thoughts, your actions, and be the man or woman that you want to be and have those goals and objectives.
I want to ask you this, Shaun, because if you were not faced with that situation, we could talk about a whole bunch of other things. But I'm one that's gonna believe that, as you mentioned, kind of for like myself, growing up as a young kid, experiencing some things that led to me being resilient. I'm going to ask you, did anything from your upbringing or from your childhood or anyone you encountered in life that put something inside of your brain to develop that resilient mindset? Because I'm going to say when you got that letter, it channeled that. Was there anything like that?
Well, I referenced before sports, and I lettered in 4 sports in high school, and I played sports from the time you could play until I got to college and figured out I wasn't big enough. But that's one side of it. But it was also growing up in an area. I grew up in the second poorest county in the state of Missouri. So when you grow up in an area like that, there's everybody's equal. And you said something in an email you sent me that's so true. I was taught respect is given, trust is earned. So we learn to respect everybody. We learn to get along with everybody. And race, sex, all these things that divide us so often in society were never an issue because everybody was equal.
Right.
So as you go through life, and I went to a small school that every school we played was 2 to 4 times our size. So you had to be resilient and a lot to win. And, and so when you learn those kind of lessons, and when I say your brothers and your sisters in that world, you learn that if you surround yourself with good people, and this is another one of those things that I really didn't believe until I went through this, you're only as good as the people around you. Well, I can tell your listeners, whatever they're doing in their life, surround yourself with people who are going to help you, hold you accountable, make you better. Because and you were in the military, and it's the same thing where it's about team. You only stay alive because of the men and women around you. And that's life, and that's business. And that's what we get all this individualism out there, and entrepreneurs are great individuals. I love that. But if they surround themselves with good people, and that's what being around kids and then young adults and then adults who challenged me and made me better, helped me to build that resilience. And I have to say this, and I know you would say it as well. I've had some wonderful mentors in my life, from family members to teachers and coaches, and then people I worked for and people I worked with, and that's what made life good, and that's why I've been able to make a comeback. Some really good people across my path, and people I would never have chosen, but I was fortunate enough to have them show up in my life.
Wow, man. So obviously you went through this experience, and you're someone that just went to jail, and going through that, not expecting that, not anticipating that, now you're in it. Being in that situation, can you talk a little bit about you're there, you're in jail, you're locked up? What is the mindset of being inside of that particular situation, knowing that you just came from this lifestyle? You was just doing all these things. You was driving this car. You had all of these things going. You was going to dinner on the weekends. You was hanging out, doing all of these things, and now your life just changed. Can you talk a little bit about the mindset in regards to what you was going through, and then the buildup and all those things that develop that resilient mindset in regards to like your plan and your anticipation of getting out of jail?
Okay. And I think it goes back to the basics of, first off, to survive in that situation, respect is of the utmost. You have to respect others. And that's for somebody like me, it was ingrained in me. But for a lot of people, if they didn't learn it, a bad situation was worse. So that's one thing that I just can't stress enough. But what got me through it was all my life I've set goals. And what you do there is you set a goal, to make it through breakfast. I spent 16 months at a place where you stood every meal because you had to fight or fly, and there isn't very far to go. And so it was just, how do I get through this situation? And then the next one, and then that day, and then the next day. And it's like anything, as you build that discipline and you build that in business, as you build that routine of how can I build something to be successful, and you do it. And it's literally one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year at a time. And that whole time, those little victories helped me become more and more resilient. And the littlest thing that I took for a victory when I was incarcerated just became monumental as you look back a week and a month and then a year. And so when you get out, you can accomplish something. It's just different thing than you've accomplished. And I've always said, and many successful people have said this, success, yeah, money's nice, but to me, it's the game, and I love the game, and I love one of my favorite thing to do is helping young entrepreneurs, and I've done that for 40 years, even when I was very young, and at the same time, it's doing things that make a difference in other people's lives, and I've experienced there's a saying that's so true, and it's in my book, at the end, seldom in life does someone realize their greatest dreams are their worst fears. Well, I've exceeded my greatest dreams, Michael, and I'm one step shy of my worst fear. Obviously, my worst fear would be losing a child because I've been blessed to have five. But right above that would be incarceration. So I've experienced above the greatest dreams and almost the worst fears, and that teaches you a lot. And I have to look at that I'm fortunate. Many people would say, how can you say you're so fortunate to have done both? Well, I'm a better person for them. There's a reason why I went through it. And it's the opportunity to talk to people like yourselves and to people in your audience. Because once you've gone through it, and I know you've done this because you've been through a lot of adversity, you feel like you're driven to help others and you're driven to get the message out there. I spoke to a group of 30 retired CEOs 2 months ago that are just on corporate boards, private companies, some on public companies, some on both. And we talked about, I said, we spent hours in conference rooms and audit meetings saying, what's the appropriate gift level for your employee to get from a client? And one time it was 50, and then we raised it to 100, and at the end it was 250. And I told those men and women that day, I said, if I had to do that today, it would be zero. And here's why.
Why?
This is why my book's called The Great Choice. You get in an airplane in LA and you're headed for Washington, D.C. If you're off by 1 degree, giving speed, time, and distance, you end up in New York City.
New York City.
And what happens is that we all start off believing the world is half good and half bad, or half black and white, as a lot of people use the analogy. But the older you get, the more you've been through, you see there's really a little bit of white and a little bit of black and a whole lot of gray.
Right.
But once you get out in that gray, once you take that gift, your judgment's clouded. Well, Michael did that for me. You do something for Michael that you wouldn't do for anybody else. And by the way, 99.9% of the time, that's okay. But along the line, there's 1 or 2 or 10 people who will use that opportunity to better their position at your expense. And so I just tell people over and over, you've got to stay true. And I didn't, and I paid a horrible price. But then I'll tell you this, because people ask me this, I wouldn't change one thing, Michael. Do I wish I would have done what I've done? Absolutely not. Do I wish it would have cost me friends, family, fortune, as I say, freedom? No, but I'm a much better person for it. And as I talk to you and anyone listening to your show, they need to take a deep look inside and say, you know what, that man wasn't as crazy as I thought. You got to be careful once you get out in the gray, because you can go from that very light gray to dark gray in a hurry.
I would like for you to expand a little bit, Shaun, on the impact of what being incarcerated did to you and your family, because you're a man with 5 kids and you had a business going. And I want our listeners to actually get a deep appreciation of the impact of how that affected, whether it was financial, whether it was your family's relationship, whether it was future business that you had going on, and if it put a halt on anything, so people could understand the layers of all of this that took place for you.
That's a great question. I'll start with family. It cost me a marriage. I have 5 kids. I'm estranged from 3. And I believe that someday it'll work out. I do believe that, but I don't like the estrangement. Your business fails when when you spend 37 months incarcerated and you spend 12 months before that under indictment, and years before that under investigation. As I say, it's not like when you rob a 7-Eleven and they dial 911 and somebody comes right after you. You know, the thing I did, I committed a crime in 2009 and I didn't even get indicted till 2016. So the toll is immense. And it's immense on yourself, your family, those you love, people you care about, people who work for you and with you. And the cost is just not even quantifiable. And I will say this, in the 4 years since I've been out, I've just met some wonderful people. And the majority of the people, overwhelming majority of people, are welcoming and kind and gracious. And of course, there's a few that just, aren't good people, and that's okay too. Whatever they think of me, I have no control over, and I just have to go on. But you try every day to make amends on one hand. On the other day, every day you try to rebuild your life. But I've just had some wonderful things happen through all that pain. So anybody who's out there, you're better off to do anything you can avoid to not committing a crime. And by the way, 200 and almost 50 years ago, there were 3 crimes: murder, counterfeiting, and treason. Now there's 40,000. So it's a different world.
So Shaun, you had the opportunity to actually now talk about your story and share that, and I would like for you, if you could, tell us a little bit about the book that you got out. Tell us a little bit about what readers can get from your book and where can they get the book as well, man.
Well, I'll start backwards. Just go to Amazon.com or preferably Shaun, spelled right as I say, ShaunHayes.com, and it'll take you to Amazon link. But the book is the story of my life. And I had a woman when I was at the bottom 7 years ago, literally right now, that ran a speakers bureau. And I called her up, and for some reason, I told her the depths of my problem. And this was 4 months before I was indicted. And she said, "Shaun, write a book." And you know what I said, Michael? I'm not that interesting. And you know what she said? "Read a book." And I read a bunch of them, and I told her, "You're laughing, but it's true." And I called her three months later, and I said, "You know what, Gail? You're right. I'm still not that interesting, but I'm as interesting as 99% of this people." Because you're going to laugh at it. I didn't let anyone I know read the book, except for one woman that I hadn't seen in years, who's about 15 years older than I am, that had a successful business. And she read it when it was in manuscript. And she said, "Shaun, I love the first third. The second third was probably a little over my head. And the last third, I cried." I speak a lot to groups, probably every week. And people who've read the book say it is a fun, easy read. Literally, I couldn't put it down. I read it in one afternoon. I read it in 2 days. Because I talk about things, and my favorite story is this one. Okay, I'm 29 years old, and we buy a bank. Now, that in itself is a funny story. But this bank has $1,100,000 in cash in there, Michael. Now, you're saying, of course it had cash because it's a bank. Well, the thing is, 9 years later, when I had 38 of them, we didn't have 50,000 in a bank, and we had more than that in an ATM. So in those days, we said, well, let's sell it down to 350,000, and if we put it in the Federal Reserve Bank, we can make an extra 5,000 or 6,000 a month. So all of a sudden, we're thinking, how can we make more money? We'd only owned the bank a few days. So being the genius I am, I picked up the phone and I called Brinks, just like you would have. And the guy on the other end of the line said, well, we can come a week from Thursday and we want $250. Well, one, that was going to cost me about $1,200 or $1,500 in lost interest. And two, I'm thinking, I'm going to pay you schmucks $250. I looked at my partner and said, we're going to load it in my car. I had a 1989 Buick. Now, by the way, it does not look like the movies that they make where $750,000 fits in a nice little briefcase. That Buick was like that. Then I drove. See, I told you you're going to laugh. Then I drove 161 miles, 120 of it on 2-lane highway. It's dark because it's in late October. Now, number one, what if the highway patrol would have pulled me over? I got $750,000 in cash. You know. And then I get home, and I didn't tell, but 10 people knew this story after I wrote the book. And my one cousin who read the book, he said, Shaun, why didn't you pull your car in the garage? Michael, I never thought of it. So we take $750,000 and we lug it into my house, which, by the way, takes a lot of trips. And then we sleep by it on the floor. And then at 4 in the morning, we get up and we drive to the Federal Reserve Bank. And at 5:15 or 5:20 in the morning, there's a line of armored cars and one 1989 red Buick like that. So, you name it, I've done it. When I didn't have a job one summer, I started a fireworks stand. I was a loan shark in college. I was a bookie. I did all kinds of crazy things, but I've had an unbelievable life. It's been so much fun. And so that's the kind of book I wrote. You get those things, you get about my crime, you get my success of how, and you talk about a very sad day in life. The morning of 9/11, I was shaving. And when the first plane hit the tower, my wife said, you better get in here. And I stood there and watched the second one. I was the first company in America to sell a public security after 9/11. And, I had a $10 million penalty if I didn't close. And of course, like all banks do, and this is where I was different, they said, oh, you can push it off a month. And I said, yeah, it'll cost me $10 million. And within a matter of 72 hours, we came up with $40 million. Wow. And within a matter of a week, well, actually 2 weeks from 9/11, we sold one of two companies selling a public security. So I've had experiences that no human can imagine from all kinds, from the good best to the worst. And that's what the book's about. But it's a journey, and it tells you in that journey my story, but you can relate it to yours. Everybody can. Life's relatable, that you are going to have ups and you're going to have downs on one hand. And on the other hand, that it is failure when you quit. Along the line, it's just one game in a long season.
Absolutely. Man, I'm going to transition to business later, but I want to talk to you about something that I think a lot of people could resonate with, man. I would say that most people could say that at this particular moment, you were at rock bottom. And to get out of that, to crawl out of that, can you talk a little bit about who were some of the people that were influential, impactful, that were supporting you, and when you got out, to be there and support you, man? Because you just kind of said that not everybody's going to support you, not everybody's going to be in your corner when you get out, man. Can you talk a little bit about who was the people that was fighting for you, supporting for you, and cheering for you, man?
Yeah, and that's another great question. Well, obviously the one nephew I mentioned. Then there was a man that I met 39 years ago this fall that I helped out literally in the fall of 01, kept his family business from failing. And he stood through this with me all the way through like none other. And then did a whole lot of other people that I really didn't even know. It's, when I was in county jail, I never took one dime. I stayed for 16 months in county jail without any money on my books because I didn't want that. I just, I'm fine. I'll live with it. And yet when I was in prison one day, I noticed I got $250 from a man I hadn't seen in 10 years. Just somebody who people did nice things for me. When I got out, a man read my book right after it came out. I'd met him one time for 15 minutes. And we ran into each other, and he read the book, and then he sent me a text and said, let's do all this together. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And we built a really fun, successful business. And, I have a whole new life. I mean, it's just amazing, the people in your journey. And there's dozens and dozens of other ones like that. And there's other people who don't take my phone call, and I only call once, or won't return you. Oh, it's good to hear from you. I'll call you back, and don't. And that's okay too. Because what you learn when you've been through what I've been through, you learn who your friends are and who they aren't. And a long time ago, I said, you only have 5. You can count them on one hand. The problem is when you go through what I went through, 4 of them disappear in most cases. But that's okay. That's okay. I'm not angry about anyone. I only have myself to blame. I've always taken responsibility. I don't live in a society where I'm a victim. I never have been. I never will be. And I think that's key to resiliency, because if you're always looking at yourself in that mirror as hard as you can, you figure out that you can help yourself. And if you help yourself, others will help you.
When I talk about overcoming adversity, you said quite a lot of things that resonates with me, man. So like resilience, accountability, responsibility. Another thing that I think that really sticks out from hearing your story, Shaun, is confidence, because there's so many people that could cower. And as you said, I did not fall into like the victim mode or anything like that, right? You had supreme confidence within yourself, within your ability to bounce back, stand on your own, and figure things out and get back on your feet. Can you talk about the level of confidence that you had, and kind of like share with our audience, what does confidence kind of mean to you, man, in regards to like whenever facing adversities in life, because you did it?
Here's something that I got when I was a freshman in college in my drawer in the fraternity house of my desk. It was called Thompson's Corollary. And it said, what is believed to be real will be real in its consequences. Perception is reality. So I was taught from an early age, if you believe you can do it, you can do about anything. Now, in my day, I could dunk a softball. Today, I couldn't even do that. But you can, in my opinion, if you put your mind to it, there's very few things you can't do with your mind. There's a lot of things you can't do physically, but when you think about it mentally, and so that confidence of knowing you can do something, if you work at it, if you devote your time and effort to it, if you have goals and objectives, and that believing that it's real, that you can make it real, will make it happen. And I believe that my whole life. My thing was a little different said, but what was in that drawer was perfect. It's perception is reality. So I think if you have the perception you're successful, that you can be successful. That's why I think it's important. When I go to a meeting, I dress for it. Absolutely. When I walk with my my head up and my shoulders back. And when I shake someone's hand, I shake it firmly. I don't try to break it, or I'm not like that. But you just can't put that limp handshake out. And it's the other thing I think is so key. And this is what today I reposted something on LinkedIn, was talking about in-person interviews. I think it's so important. There are times in life and in business where you need to look the other man or woman in the eye. And we live in a society where people hide behind text and email and voicemail. And you need to be able to look at, I love this because your show, I get to look at you and I get to judge you in a way that I couldn't do without, seeing the video. And as I said, I used to talk to my employees. I one time fired a woman and she was really bright, but I told her, I said, this guy, Michael, wants this deal. We're going to do his deal. But there's 11 things on the table. These 4, I'm taking no matter what. These 4 give to him. These 3 negotiate with him. And I could look out my window and see his office down the street, literally. And a couple hours later, I got an email from him, or a call from him, and he said, Shaun, he goes, and he starts talking to me. I said, wait a minute. She goes, well, Gene sent me an email. I went through the roof because, if you're on the phone and I can't see you doing this, or, right. I put it on mute and I go, can I have an iced tea or something? I can't do this. But when you got to look at somebody in the eye, it's hard to tell them no. And when you come across that confident and I lean forward and I say, Michael, how about we try to do it this way? It's a lot harder for you to tell me no.
Right.
And that's what confidence is. Confidence is being able to sit there and look like, wow, this man or woman's going to take the world on. And it's one of those things that you can do. When I was going through the worst of my times, my wife would look at me in the morning. She goes, how can you walk out of this house looking like you're winning? Because she knew what was going on. And I said, because they're going to eat me. But if I go out there looking like I want to be eaten, they're really going to eat me. And that's life. That's business. You got to go out there. If you look like you're going to lose, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
That's why I love people who dress well and who come across and they set well. Little things like that change the game. And that military sports, they teach you to do that, to be respectful. There's nothing more. You don't have to be intimidating. The best person is that humble, grateful person, but they're firm.
Right.
I was called about 4 years ago. I had an investment in the car business, and it was a real car dealer there, and a guy who's a great salesman who worked for me, who'd been in that business for 15 years, and myself. And the car dealer looked at me one afternoon. He said, "Shaun, you're an SOB." And I looked back at him, and I'll call him Michael, and I said, "Michael, years ago I would have argued with you, but I'm going to think about it." And the next month when we met, I looked at him. I said, "You know what, Michael? I am an SOB, but here's why. I can say no. I can hold firm. I'm not mean-spirited. I've never tried to hurt somebody, but you've got to stand for something." And I think that's part of confidence. If you stand for something, I can disagree with you, but if you stand for it with passion, I respect you for that. And I may not like your position, but I'm going to want to do business with you, even if I don't like that part, because you stand on something, you believe in something. And I think that's so important. To me, that's confidence.
Man, I 1000% agree with you. I will lend a little to what you said earlier, is that when I was serving in the military, one of my drill instructors said to me, he said, "Dress how you want to be addressed." And that stood out to me in regards to, like, if you go out here looking like this, people are going to treat you like this, whether you like it or not. Based off how you dress and how you carry yourself, how you look, how you shake your hand, how you shake hands, how you look people in the eye, how you communicate with people, they will address you and treat you in a certain way. And it's kind of like how you set certain standards and what you tolerate too as well, man. So thank you for saying that, man. I want to ask you this, and I think a lot of our listeners would probably want to know this as well, because some of our audience are business owners too. How does one get into business and scale a business to be $1 billion business? You just told us you took tons and tons of money and slept on it at your house. Then obviously you went through your situation, you got out, and you regained, regrouped, and built your business back again. And you figured that out and you navigated that. On all seriousness, can you talk to our business owners, our entrepreneurs, our small business owners, man? What does it take? What is it that was within you? What skills did you learn or gain as you was evolving, as you was growing, as you was going through your journey that could help our entrepreneur business owners, man?
The first thing I tell everybody, and I've said this for 30 some years, if whatever you're starting, a widget business, a service company, whatever, a house cleaning, find a banker, find an insurance person, find an accountant, find a lawyer. Today's world, find an IT person. Find a retired person from your industry and get them vested in you. You don't have money to pay them always. Have them to your house for a barbecue. Do something that builds a relationship and respect them and pick their brains. I used to do that and give people $50 every 90 days for their advice. And that was 35 years ago. But that was the best money I ever spent, and you have to look at it. Was $50 wasn't a lot to them, but it was the idea in those days they could take their significant other to eat. Now you probably have to give them 100. Right. But the idea is 4 times a year to get those people's ear and to have them know they'll return your email or your call when you have a question is key. That's one thing. The other thing is I always knew that I had to accept failure along the line, because you are going to fail. If you're not making mistakes, if you're not losing opportunities, you're not charging enough. You're not trying to get enough business. So you have to accept the fact you're not going to get every deal. You're not going to get every client. You're not always going to be this, but try it every once in a while, price up and see what happens. All you can do is lose the business. No, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't. It's not. We're not talking a sexual kind of situation or something that's personal. We're talking business. Telling me no doesn't hurt my feelings. It's like all these sales things say you haven't really done anything. You've been told no 100 times. I was on a panel several years ago, with the Shaun who didn't spell his name right, and he invented the earbuds. And I want to make the story short because he started off with it. He and his buddy wanted to do this, and he had $175,000 he and his wife had saved. It was all the money they had in the world. And he says, I want to do this. And she goes, I'll give you 1 year. And at the end of the year, if you don't make it, I'm not going to be mad. We'll start over. It's okay. We'll downsize. But you've had your one chance.
Mm.
Do you know when they got their first sale? Day 364. He heard a lot of no's. You've got to be, that's that same resilience. You got to be willing to hear no's before you're going to get yes. So it's surround yourself with those people. It's that I hear people all the time say, I can't get the capital. Michael, that's not true. If you've got a good idea, you can get the capital. It's what does it cost you? And it was 1980, and I was dating a girl's dad who'd retired at 36, very successful. And we took a case of beer and sat on the back of a pickup truck one hot July night, and I thought I was smart. And I said, well, Mr. Perry, isn't it terrible that the prime interest rate's 20%? You know what he said? It doesn't matter. And I said, whoa. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, if you're doing a business and you got to borrow 20%, you better make sure you're making more than that on it.
Mm.
And that's how you have to look at capital. It has a cost. Now, over time, if you start here, you should drive it down. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that happen thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you drive the cost of capital down each time. But money is never the thing. Lastly, it's being able to delegate. When I was 25, I was put in a very senior position in a big company. And guess what? I micromanaged my people. I would have hated me if I'd have been them. And by the way, most of them were 25 or 30 years older. You have to let people go. And as I say, give people enough rope to hang themselves. Don't let them be able to sell the kitchen sink, but give them enough so they feel responsibility. And if they do a good job, give them more. If they don't, get rid of them. Mm-hmm. And lastly, I was very loyal. I am very loyal. And I call people role players. So you bring in John and he does a job and you get 4 or 5 years down the line and the Peter principle set in. He's reached the top. I never fired him or cut his salary. I found another job. He might have been making more money he should have, but then I could bring in Mary who could take me to the next level. I call that infrastructure building. You're always building infrastructure in your company as you build it. And there's a story in the book on how I learned that the hard way. I lost $1,547,000 in one weekend, Labor Day weekend, 1997. And I won't take your listeners' time to do it, but I beat the airbag out of my car in front of my second son's school because I just wanted to fire somebody, Michael. And you know what I decided by the end of the week?
What?
I had to fire myself because it was my decisions that got me there. And that's what you have to learn is, you build that infrastructure, you use people, and then you go on. And if you do those things, you're going to be successful in anything you do. But the last thing is, and this is what's wrong with microwave society, tech society, instant gratification society. People thought I was an instant success. Well, went from 15 years from buying a bank for 3.3 million to selling it for $500 million. Then after I failed several years later, and now then I've come back again, but I didn't come back day one. And I know from your story, no one's, there is no such thing as a lottery winner. You earn it every day. That's how I've won the lottery. I've won it my whole life, but it's been one day at a time.
No doubt, man. Wow. What are some mantras or philosophy that you live by in today's trying times, man? Because, there's so many things that's tugging at us, pulling at us in different direction. But I love the word that you said, man. You remained loyal to the core and true to your authentic self, man.
Well, I live, one thing that I, in today's world, I look at, and I always have done this, every man and woman in the world is green to me. There's no place in business or life for issues to deal with color. Mm-hmm. And that's something that as you get older, it really bothers you. And the second bank I bought was in the poorest census tract, highest crime rate, virtually entirely African American part of St. Louis. And I thrived and did well. People go, the Bush family on one end in St. Louis, and the African American community. And I said, yeah, because you got to be part of the community, and you can't let anything stand in your way. It's not sexual orientation. It's not any of this stuff. That's stuff. So that's something that I live by. The other thing I live by, and obviously when I say this, you're gonna say, well, gosh, everybody knows that. Unless you're sending somebody to the moon or doing heart or brain surgery, don't let perfect stand away in front of good. I have a friend in Chicago, and he calls it Arsenal building. If I just had one more thing, I could do it, Michael. But wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. If I just had one more and one more, well, that isn't it. It's just go do it. I think Nike hits the ball out of the park. What do they say? Just do it. And by the way, we did some screwy stuff. How many people put $750,000 in their car trunk for about $1,500 or $2,000? By that, money was not insured either. So the point is, you just do it. And yeah, you're going to stub your toe. You're going to do, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to do the right thing. I did new employee orientation for about 19 years. Not only the 15 of my own company, but 4 to the company I sold to. And I told them, I said, I've had 10,000 calls. I had no caller ID at home and no call notes. If I was home, I answered the phone. In my office, I answered the phone. I gave people my cell phone, my home phone. I was in the white pages. Anybody could find me. But I said that the 10,000 times somebody called me about your actions, 9,997 times, you all did the right thing. The 3 times you didn't, that's okay. So, it's about looking at life like that. And if you do that in life and in business, you're going to be successful. I don't care what you do.
Shaun, I know that we could sit up here and talk forever because we did not even get deep into business, because I'm quite sure our listeners probably want to know, how the hell did you buy a bank? Because that's not something that people talk about a lot. But our show is about overcoming adversity. So with that being said, man, I just want to tell you, brother, thank you so much for coming on here, being vulnerable, transparent, and sharing your story, man. It's truly, truly a pleasure to have you here, man. Can you leave us with some lessons from your story? Obviously, you come from humble beginnings, been through some trials and tribulations, and obviously bounced back. For the listener that's listening, that's facing a tough time, that's probably in a rut, that's probably feeling that rock bottom, what can they take from your story as some life lessons, man?
Well, one easy one I want to say that covers everybody. The golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated, and it'll come back 1,000-fold. And the golden rule is that, not who owns the gold rules. We've forgotten that in society. The most important thing is accept failure. Don't like it, accept it. Learn from it. Show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. Show me somebody who learns from losing, I'll show you a winner. Because once you learn from losing, I watched Miracle on Ice last night. And there's such a we lost 13-2 in the game in Madison Square Garden. Then we beat the Russians 4-3 when it mattered. We learned from losing in that movie. That's a piece of history. You have to learn from losing, but be prepared to lose. And it's tough out there. And by the way, don't ever worry about your competition. Worry about your customer. If you take care of your customer, good things will happen. You can't spend your time worrying what the other man or woman is doing. You got to worry about what you can do. And you'll always come over adversity, because your competitors, if they're watching you, they're watching the wrong thing. They need to watch who's buying their product or service.
Absolutely. Shaun, if everybody wanted to get a hold of you, man, book you for a speaking engagement, book you for some consulting or podcast, how can they get a hold of you?
The best way is Shaun, SHAUN, at ShaunHayes.com. And, I'll do like I've always done. My cell phone number, because I want yours to email me yours, because my cell phone's 314-993-5000. Because I'm going to buy you that cup of coffee in a couple months when I'm at a place that's 70 degrees warmer than where I'll be.
Hey, man, I can't wait for you to come down here for us to sit down and have this coffee and talk a little bit more, man. You're truly a man of inspiration, but a guy that I know that has truly X amount of knowledge that you can share with me too as well, man. And it's a pleasure to have you here, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Guys, if you like this episode, make sure you leave a comment. But most importantly, share with a family, a friend, or a loved one, as I know that Shaun's story could make an impact. Until next time, God bless.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.